How's everybody doing? This is Mickey. Well, last week Adobe wrapped up their conference, their Adobe Max conference, and they gave us some upgrades to Lightroom. Now, I have to be honest, I really didn't expect anything major from Adobe with Lightroom because they've done such a fantastic job in the last year giving us great new masking features. But they did come up with at least one upgrade that really knocks it out of the park. They had several that were nice, but the main one, the one that just gives us more abilities than we've ever had before when it comes to color management and Lightroom, is giving us the new feature called Point Color. Now, Point Color allows us to define or mask a certain color, a range of colors, and effectively modify their hue, as we can see here, their saturation, their luminance, and we can do that by separate color, as you can see. We can make these changes without affecting any other color in the photograph. So simply put, Lightroom has given us a tool to easily select and define a color and modify it without touching any other color in the photograph. Not only that, they went further and gave us this ability when using masks. Currently, the way to modify color when you have mask an area is just totally inadequate in my opinion, and it needs to be beefed up, but I didn't expect this. This is just a phenomenal tool when it comes to masking. It's a huge improvement to masking capabilities when it comes to controlling color. Now, when we look at our Lightroom setup, I'm just going to go back in the past here a little bit, and this is what we looked at in version 12 and earlier. We had a HSL and we had color. The HSL is, you can choose your saturation, luminance, and hue of any color that you want to affect. The good thing is you had complete control over that specific color. The bad thing is you had no control of the range of that color. So when you made changes in red, it was across all shades or all hues of red when you made the changes. And the other tool that we had was the color. And again, you just chose your color and you slid your hue, saturation, or luminance, changing green. Didn't matter what shade of green it was always going to be all shades of green. They get changed. But when they gave us the new setup of Color Mixer, they gave us the ability to do the same thing as HSL, only we can define the specific shade of red or the specific shade of green that we want to change. It's like they took the Clark Kent of HSL, took his glasses off, and he busts out of the phone booth, and they give us Point Color. So let me just go into this real quick and show you the basics of the tool of Point Color. You'll find it in Lightroom when you're in the Develop module, and it's under Color Mixer. Now, like I showed you in the prior version, you didn't have Color Mixer, you had HSL Color, and you still have that. It's just that it's now in the Color Mixer area. So if we open up Color Mixer, you'll see that you have the mixer, and when we click Mixer, we have a drop down of HSL, and there you see your HSL, or we have Color, and there we have our color windows. But the big change, the big mama of color control now is going to be Point Color. Now there are several panes in the Point Color, and I want to show those to you. The first off, you have this eyedropper. Now the eyedropper lets you go and select the color that you want to start to define a range. So we'll just select this green color right here. Now you also have the area down below which allows you to change the color that you've selected. So we selected this range of green, and it's going to allow us to change that green. Now it's acting just like the HSL sliders here because they really haven't defined specifically this color. This pane here, this swatch, shows the color that you're working on. This again shows you the swatch you're working on. We have a little drop down area right here. Again, this is giving you a graphical representation of your hue, your saturation, and your luminance. So your hue can also be changed by grabbing this little dot and moving it left to right. That's your hue. Up and down is saturation, and luminance is in this slider over here. The little dot you see here is the color that you selected with your eyedropper. All right, at the very bottom here, you see something called range. And this is just like the color or luminance slider that you have when you're using the masking brush or the masking area in Lightroom. When you change the range, you can see that it changes the area of selection that you've chosen here. Now, we're not really seeing any changes as we do the range, and that's because we haven't turned on another tool, and that's called Visualize Range. When we turn on Visualize Range, any color that doesn't fall within the range that we want to modify, it will turn gray or white. So as I move my range to the left, I start limiting the colors that I can select. So you can see we've lost 3, almost 4 of the colors that we can now affect. So right now, if I make any changes to hue, or we'll do luminance, you'll see that really the only ones that are changing are these here. So here comes the secret of using point color. If you click on this down arrow, you now see we have 3 more sliders: hue range, saturation range, and luminance range. And with these sliders, it's where we start to narrowly define what color is that we want to affect. Now, we clicked on this color, so this is the one that what we would try to do. The best of all worlds is that every block of color green will be gray except for the one that we want to change. And to make that change, we're going to have to change our hue, saturation, and luminance range. Now, we aren't actually changing the color of any of these. These are the range sliders. This is what's limiting what we can change. All right, all the changes to the color will be done with the hue, saturation, and luminance shift. Now, when we look at the tool, you'll see that you have a box with a dot in the center. All right, that is, the dot corresponds to this dot here. That is where the current color is selected. This shows the range of visibility. So anything in the box is the range of green that is showing in this hue range on this color here. If we grab the sides of the box, we can change the range that we see. On the sides, you see little arrows that we can move in and out, and this is our feather. This is where we can change the fine details of the color that we're selecting. Now, the concept to do this is real simple. Move the sliders, move your boxes till you get everything gray except for the color that you want. That's the process. But in actuality, it's a little more difficult than that. It's not terrible. It just means you have to spend a little time to get to know your sliders so that you can make these changes quickly. So if we look, we can see we have different colors of luminance here, or different light luminance slide. Under saturation, you can see it goes from gray to dark green, and then under hue, you can see we have like a blue-green all the way to a yellow-green. And what you're going to do is you're going to move these boxes around till you get nothing but gray boxes except for the one color swatch, this one right here that we selected, till that's the only color that remains. So let me just start narrowing down these boxes, and as you do this, you'll see that the other boxes start to disappear. We'll move the slider. Now we're down to just 2. I'll move this over to the darker side of the luminance. Bring this slider in. And now we only have one color selected, the one that we clicked on when we made our selection up here with our eyedropper. Now we'll turn the Visualize Range off, and we have all the colors back. But remember, when we had Visualize on, we're saying that we've changed our range sliders so that the only color that's going to be affected is this one. All the colors in gray when we have Visualize Range on means they have been deselected and will no longer be affected when we start making our changes under our Shift keys. All right, let's turn Visualize off. And now let's make some changes to the hue, let's say. And as you see, when I change my hue of my center square, nothing else is affected. Change the saturation, change my luminance. So we have effectively eliminated 6 of these squares because the only color we cared about was this center color. And by moving our sliders now, we can make that green the color that we want. Now, like I said, you can use the sliders, or you can just go manually and grab this and start moving it around till you get to the color that you think is the one that you want. So if you wanted a deep green, we'd move our saturation and hue up to the upper right hand corner and grab our luminance, and we can change that too. So that's the basic function of the color point. Now let's go into a photograph and start looking to see what we can do with this slider, with this point color sliders. All right, here we are with a picture, a fall waterfall picture from Maine. Now what we want to do is we want to enhance our colors and our oranges and our yellows and our greens, but we want to do it in a way that we don't affect other parts of the photograph. And we're going to do this by using point color, and we're also going to do a little bit by putting a mask on and affecting color that way too. So let's start out by going to our color mixer pane and going to point color. The first thing we're going to do is enhance this orange that we see in the trees here, a little bit over here. So we're going to choose our eyedropper, and we're going to hover over the color, and when you do, you see it zooms in for you so you can choose just the color that you want. So let's choose this color right about here. You can see it selects the color, gives us the main selection right here in our window and our luminance, and we can start using our sliders to change the range. Now the first thing I like to do is I just go ahead and turn on visualize range. And you can see already, because we selected orange, there's not a lot of orange in the photograph, and all we see is a little color in our yellow that was in these trees here. So if we take the range slider and we slide it all the way down, it really just does about everything that we need. It got rid of all the color. We want to see black and white and gray, except for the areas we're going to affect. I'm going to open this up a little bit so we can see a little more of the red. I'm going to open up the target sliders here, and you can see that more red is coming in. Open a little up here, and maybe a little bit this way. Now when we do that, you can see it's starting to bring in a little yellow. So I'm going to bring in these sliders. That's the feather, so that it doesn't reach out and grab the colors similar to the red. It's only grabbing the red. Let me bring this in like this. I'll move this a little more that way. And now we see that we have pretty much everything in red that we wanted to affect, even the little areas right in here. I'll turn the visualize range off, and now we can start changing our colors. I'm going to shift the hue a little bit. Now I'm going to brighten these up a little more than usual so you can see it, because sometimes on these YouTube videos it's hard to see changes. So they might be a little brighter than what you're used to seeing in a real photograph. So I'm going to drop the hue a little bit. I'm going to raise up the saturation, and I'm going to brighten it up. Let me just change that a little. That's a little too red. Let's bring a little of that like that. Now, like I said, you can also always just grab this and start moving this around to find just the right color that you want. So remember, hue is left and right, and saturation is up and down. So we can bring the saturation up a little bit and change the color to about right there. Now if I turn the eye off of the color mixer, that's before, after, before, and after. All right, the next thing we want to do is we want to brighten up these yellows a little bit. So let's take our eyedropper, let's hover over a yellow color, click, and we get now a new color swatch right here in the yellow. So we'll turn on the visualizer, and now we see we have yellow, but we have some of this orange in here too. So let's grab our range slider and bring it down, and it took some of that orange away, and we still have the yellow. So what we want to do is to move away from the orange color like this. Let me bring this over a little bit. Let's open up the yellows about like this, a little more. Bring our feather in so we don't get any of that orange. As you can see, it's pretty much turned that to a white, so we're pretty good. We still have a little bit down here and we can talk about that a little later. So let's turn the visualize off, and let's boost up our saturation a little bit, and we'll light it up. And we might want to bring a little orange into this yellow. Take the saturation down just a little bit. And like I said, I'm oversaturating this a little bit just so it becomes very evident in the video, but in real life we really wouldn't take it quite this far. So now let's turn off our mixer, before, after, before, and after. All right, the next thing we want to do, and it's the last thing we're going to do for color on this picture, is the greens. Now what I'm really interested in is in the greens down here, we have light hitting the edges of these evergreens, and that's the color I really want to bring out. So I'm going to choose my eyedropper, and I'm going to go down here. I'm going to find one of these lighter green edges of the leaves. So I'm going to choose about right here and click there. Now let's turn our visualizer on, and as you can see, everything pretty much is covered already. Everything that's in gray we don't want to affect. Everything in green is what we're going to affect. So let's slide the range over a little bit. And I want to see more of the yellow, so I'm going to slide my hue down more toward the yellow range and the light green like this. I'm going to bring my feather over. Now another thing you can do that I find quite helpful, because this kind of is hard to see with the green against the black and gray, but if you take your luminance shift and crank it all the way up, and we aren't going to leave it like that, but at least it identifies the areas that we're going to be affecting, right? Because we're not affecting the hue, saturate, or luminance yet. We're trying to define the certain color that we're going to use. So now as I change these ranges, you can see the changes a lot easier than you could without the luminance up so high. So once I get all the areas selected like I want by moving my sliders, we'll say about like that, I'm going to bring my luminance back down right, and I'm going to turn off my visualize range, and now we're going to use our hue shift for saturation, luminance, and hue. We're going to start making our changes now. Don't need a lot of change in hue. Saturate it a little bit more, and we'll bring up the light just a little bit with luminance. And like I say, once you get your color selected, you can make the changes any way you want with any of the tools. Go to a very deep green to a very light yellow green. And just to prove how easy it is to make these changes, I'm going to make it, like I said, a little brighter than normal, just so we can see our changes. So now with the changes we put in effect, before, after, before, and after. Now there's one other area, remember we're talking about we can mask and make kind of color changes to the masked area. And I kind of like these leaves that are sitting in the kind of the shadows and on the rocks that have fallen from the trees, and I want to enhance them. But if I try to click on a single one, because they're orange, they're also going to affect the colors up here. It's going to affect the yellow. So I just want to affect the leaves in this area. So let me zoom in just a little bit so we can see this. And we're going to grab a mask, and we're going to grab a brush, and I'm just going to brush in a rough mask because we're just fiddling with color here, so it really doesn't matter about the shape of the mask. All I want to do is get this area covered so I can affect the colors within this mask. So once we have the mask defined, we can look in our mask 1. You see you also have point color here, and we open that up. Now here's the thing, because this caught me a couple times. The point color here controls all the color in the mask. You still have your point color down here in your color mixer. This will affect everything not in the mask, so we don't need to be touching this right now. We're only concerned with the mask point color. So we're going to grab our eyedropper. Now when we grab our eyedropper, it turns the mask overlay off, because honestly we need to see what we're doing. So the Lightroom is giving us the ability to see without having to turn the overlay off. It'll do it automatically. And we're going to go find a color. I'm going to choose this little orange kind of brown color and select that. Now I'm going to turn my visualize range on. I'm going to crank up my luminosity because I just want to see what I'm affecting. This is just for selection right now. It's just a tool I use to see easier, because when we look at it here, it's kind of hard to see within the mask what we're working on. So I just up the luminosity, and that way I can see. Now I'm going to make some changes to my hue, saturate it a little bit, and bring down the luminance because that was just way out of bounds. Might change the range a little bit just so it's picking up here. So here you can see, and again, this is just a little brighter than I probably would in real life, but I just want you to be able to see it. So if I turn this off and on, you can see it's affecting the colors here. If it's starting hitting the rocks, because it looks like it is right here, if I turn the darks down just a little bit, about like this, it won't hit the rocks quite as much. Like that. All right. So that's how we mask our color point with a mask. You can also do that. There's another area up here. It's this little patch of grass right here, and it is almost the same color as the leaves up here. So if I try to make any changes here, it's also going to affect everything up there. And if you wanted to affect just this color here, you could grab like a radial mask. Let's do that. Let's grab a radial, and we're just going to put it around this area that we want to affect. So that means that none of these areas will be affected except this area right here. All right, we're going to grab our color dropper, eyedropper, and we're going to choose our color. And now you can see if I turn the luminosity off and on, the only thing we're affecting is the color right there within the mask. So I can refine the sliders just a little bit, take some of that green out. And now I have the ability, I want to make this a little greener, I can do that. If I want to make it redder, I can do that. So we're just going to hue shift a little bit more towards the green side. With a little saturation and just a little luminosity. So if we look at the mask, we can see the color change from here to here. Just a little lighter, not quite as red as I wanted it. I want it to be more towards the green side. We might bring the luminosity down just a little bit. So there's an example of a global change using our reds, yellows, and greens, and then a local change with a mask, the leaves on the rock, and the grass up here at the top of the waterfall. All right, I want to show you one more example, and this one is a really great tool, especially for portraits, but there's other uses for it too in landscape and other types of photography. Let me show you this picture here. Don't mean to scare anybody, but we can use point color to affect the changes of areas on the skin. So we want to make the skin a more uniform color. Let me zoom in just a little bit. And what we're going to do, first we're going to mask this area. So choose people, and I'm going to use facial skin and create the mask. I'm also going to add this area right here because my beard's in the way. It didn't select that. So I'm going to go to mask 1. I'm going to add by brush, and I'm just going to brush in just a little bit in this area that also has some skin color. All right, so the first thing we want to do is to define the area that's causing us a problem, which is the red on the cheeks and the nose. So we're going to click right here, and what we're going to do is we're going to change our range sliders so that we get a uniform look on the face, a uniform color. All right, so let's narrow the hue down just a little bit, and let's turn on our visualize range. And we can already see we got the pink around the nose and the cheeks and a little bit on the forehead. So let's narrow the selection down so we're getting just the pink. Let's shift the saturation over a little bit so we get everything covered well. We'll shift the saturation over so we get more of the forehead. So right now the selections that we've made, and remember we have a mask on, so we're only affecting things in the chest and in the face. So now we want to turn off our visualize range, look at the whole face, and we're going to adjust the hue, the saturation, and the luminance till we get a uniform color on the face. Brighten it up just a little bit. So that gives us a uniform color across the whole face, but it looks a little washed out. But here's what you can do. It's just a great tool to use in point color. Is that we grab our eyedropper and we sample the new color. See right here, and we don't need to do any range changes because all we want to do now is to change the color of the face. Because remember, we made the face all the same color when we did our first adjustment. And now all we have to do is go in here and make some adjustments. And now we have a uniform color across the whole face. So if we look at our before and after, before and after. So what point color allows us to do is define the problem areas, smooth that out with our hue, saturation, and luminance change. And once we smooth that out, we then choose the new color and then make our changes in hue and saturation to give it a more natural look. All right. You can also notice if you look up here around the sliders, you can see that each swatch has two colors in it now. The top color is the color what we started with and what we changed it to. Same way here. What we started with, what we changed it to. You also see it in this bar here. That was the color we started with. This is the color we're now on. You can also look at the graphical representation and you can make changes here. If you want to do fine changes, if you hold your shift key down, you can just move your hue up and down. It won't go left and right into saturation. If you hold your command key down, you now can do the same thing with saturation. All right. If you hold your option key down, you can move your hue and saturation in very delicate movements. So very fine movements will be made if you hold the option key down. Those are some shortcuts you can use. If you want to reset any of these, just double click on them, brings them back to 0. Double clicking inside your box here will bring the settings back to how they started. So those are some shortcuts you can use to further define your range and your color setting. I hope this helps out. It's such a great tool. It's a really fun one to grab a picture and start making adjustments just to see what each slider does. That's why I was saying the concept of how you use it is very simple. Put it in practice, that takes a little work, but it's fun when you do it. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to me. I'll be glad to help you any way I can, and I'll talk to you soon.